Thank you for joining us on our QTV Business and Economy program. The Business and Economy program is intended to promote the ideals of a corporate Gambia identity with the objective of forging partnerships through dialogue between the public and the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community. In today's episode, we shall be discussing the ICT sector, and in particular, we shall be making reference to a recent story that has emerged on social media, in which it is purported that Zoom Wireless Company, a company that has been registered in the Gambia but which is yet to commence operations, has been acquired by Group Sonatel. There has been a lot of misgivings and perhaps non-facts circulating on social media, and it is for purposes of clarifying on those issues that we have invited the Honorable Minister of Information Communications Infrastructure, Honorable Ibrahima Silla, who would be joining us in these discussions, along with the Executive Secretary of the Gambia Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Mr. Amadou Cisse. We have also in our midst two representatives from PURA. We have currently with us Mr. Junkung Jobate, who is the head of legal. Subsequently, we'll be joined on this program by Nicholas Jata, who is the director of ICT at the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, these would inform our discussions over the next 1 hour. But to help kickstart us in the right direction, I would want to begin by asking the Honorable Minister, Honorable Ibrahima Silla, to give us a brief overview in terms of the ICT sector. But in particular, I want to make reference, perhaps opening this program, in terms of the recent developments that we've had in the sector regarding the repositioning of GAMTEL and GAMCEL. And perhaps let me just give a little bit of a background in terms of how in the Western world, prior to the 1980s, before the incoming or the onslaught of Reaganism and Thatcherism, where in the United States, in the Western world, in the UK, ICT was pretty much a regulated industry. But with the incoming of Reagan as the President of the United States and Margaret Thatcher rising to power in the United Kingdom, we saw that when they came, they said, hell with regulation, it's all about privatization, let us break monopoly power. And I am putting that perspective within our discussions in line with what is being conceived or looked at now currently in the Gambia in terms of the repositioning of GAMTEL and GAMCEL. Is the repositioning in that direction, or is the repositioning in a different direction? By way of introduction, that should set us off.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robert. Indeed, the government of the Gambia, through a support from the World Bank, did an option study on both GAMTEL and GAMCEL and the ICT sector in general. And the study came out with some very interesting outcomes. One of which, of course, is that GAMTEL, GAMCEL are overstaffed. We all know that. The current business model that the two companies are relying on are not cost effective and also may make it so difficult to compete effectively in the sector. But more importantly, the two institutions have aging infrastructure, an infrastructure that cannot be relied on to deal with the modern models of the ICT industry. As a result, the option study recommended a number of options, which the government actually studied carefully with our critical stakeholders. We took this to cabinet, and it has been decided that government should go along with specific issues in the option study. First, it is agreed that we need to reposition both GAMTEL and GAMCEL. We look at their management structure. We look at their management operational failings. We look at issues related to sustainability. And we also have agreed to support the ongoing efforts. First, if we reposition the institutions, then we look at the issue of divestiture, so that the two institutions can be effective. But we are going through this through a very comprehensive guidance, with the support of the regulator PURA, and also the Ministry of Finance, that in fact is supposed to take the lead in this. The Ministry of Information and Communication Infrastructure will of course provide the necessary technical guidance and support to ensure that we don't have unnecessary shocks when it comes to the issues. Happily, we have the Competition Commission here. They have a critical role to play in this, because anything that has to do with divestiture, of course, you have to look at competition issues. I mean, I'm sure companies will bid, and government will have to come to a conclusion. But how do they come to that conclusion is critical to ensure that everything is seamless. So we are taking this issue very seriously, because we want to see a robust ICT infrastructure that actually responds to the needs of the consumers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think by way of a follow-up question, you did indicate that one of the options towards the repositioning of Gamtel-Gamcel would be through divestiture. But as we know, divestiture can be quite broad and could be realized in a number of ways. When you speak of divestiture, what are you looking at in particular? Are you looking at foreign investors, or even perhaps local investors coming in and taking a stake within the operations of Gamtel and Gamcel? And if that is the idea, then are we looking at government doing away with what government owns within the Gamtel framework, or are we looking at divesting that bit that is perhaps owned by the other shareholders of Gamtel, who are not necessarily central government?
Well, I think we have only two shareholders of Gamtel. One is, I think, the Social Security. I think, Gambia Ports Authority, which owns a small percentage, and the rest is owned by the Gambia government. This was done to ensure that at the time, government plays a major role, both as policy but also in operations. Now, following the option study, it was agreed that we have to do the divestiture, but the way we are looking at it is to do it in a manner that will, benefit Gambians inside the Gambia and also those Gambians that are outside. One option that is on the table is for the government to divest 51% of its shares, okay, where Gambians inside the Gambia can buy with a minimum equity share of maybe $5,000, for example. Then you have the opportunity of having so many Gambians buying shares, and then you put a ceiling where you don't want to have these super monster investors within that group, where you can probably put it at $15,000, for example. Then in that way, you have as many people as possible owning shares, and then you create a national company owned by Gambians inside the Gambia and outside. Then the other 49, government can say, okay, since this institution needs a serious, capitalization, also modernization, why not we open the tender to probably tier 1 companies international who will come with the necessary investment and capacity and technology, and then, they can take probably a percentage of the other 49%. Because the important thing is for, the institution to operate in a manner that it will not also affect its operational credibility. This is something that we are looking at, and if that decision comes, of course, a national committee will be formed, and it will guide the government so that all the issues that we envisage to be good practices can be put together in this, and then we move on with the divestiture.
Okay. Let me come to Mr. Cisse, the Executive Secretary of the Gambia Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. The discussion as per the revelations of the Honorable Minister, pretty much reminds me of the days of the Gambia Divestiture Agency in the country, GDA. And pretty much what that agency used to do now exclusively rests with your institution, the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. Here we are talking of divestiture. And here, wherever you talk of divestiture, wherever you talk of acquisition, wherever you talk of competition, it is your institution that should be at the forefront. I'm sure this must be welcomed news for you, especially when the Honorable Minister makes the point that your institution has a key role to play within this repositioning of GAMTEL and GAMCEL. From the legal perspective, or from the mandate of your institution, what advice perhaps would you have in terms of the manner in which this repositioning should unfold as long as GAMTEL and GAMCEL is concerned?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for inviting us. Let me also say for the record that we haven't been contacted yet to give any advice on this. So we haven't looked at the matter to give any position or any direction. Now let me also give by way of introduction what the GCCPC is all about. The GCC is an independent public institution that was established in June 2007 to enforce the Competition Act, which aims to promote and enforce competition in all sectors of the Gambian economy. In 2014, the mandate of consumer protection was added to our institution, and that's why that necessitated the name change from GCC to GCCPC, Gambia Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. Now, the Competition Act has three substantive areas. The first area is what we call anti-competitive business practices, which is very clear to all and sundry, things like price fixing, market sharing, etc. They are subject to outright prohibition. That means they are prohibited under the Act. The second bit deals with issues that are referred to in the Act as subject to prohibition, meaning you have to look at it, study it, and then make a determination. And they refers to the issues that you've mentioned, like monopolies and all that, etc. What we should understand is that being in a monopoly position, as far as the Act is concerned, is not illegal. But abusing that monopoly power is what we address. So you can, like I said, you can be in a monopoly, GAMTEL can be, because they are more efficient. That is okay, we don't have any issues with that. It's only when they abuse their monopoly position to the detriment of competition and consumer protection that we come in. Now the third issue is what you've talked about, is mergers and acquisition. I think we should understand why that is so in competition. The reason competition authorities engage in mergers and acquisition is to enable authorities to vet in advance whether a proposed merger or acquisition will result in anti-competitive practices. We can, for instance, require the merging parties to enter into what we call them structural adjustments to mitigate the impact of the anti-competitive practices. We can approve it, of course, without any structural remedies. We can also, we have the powers to also deny the merger, not approve it, so it stops where it is. Again, when we do that, we are bound by things like market share. So before you can analyze the effect of anything in the sector, you need to know the market share so you can start the analysis. And then we're also guided by, of course, its impact on consumers. Does it lead to an enhancement of consumer welfare? So those are the guiding principles that we do use to analyze mergers. But since we haven't been asked to do that, I cannot definitively say yes, no, adjustments need to be made.
Yeah, I also have to say that we've not even set the national committee yet. And when that is done, hopefully before the end of this month, of course, a national stakeholder meeting will be held, led by the Ministry of Finance, of course. My ministry will be included, the competitor, the regulator will be included, and of course, the Competition Commission, because that is extremely necessary. Yeah.
That's good. And the
Yeah.
important thing is that we have done a market study on
Exactly.
this issue. So
Wow.
we have the current data that we've done. Of course, we have an MOU with Pura. So any market study that we do on this sector, we work together. So we get the current data with everything. So it's almost on a silver platter. So you know what the competition issues are already in this sector.
Okay.
So it will be very useful for you to make reference to that document.
But for the purposes of this interview, and barring the fact that you have not been contacted yet in terms of what is a looming issue, and as the Honourable Minister rightly pointed out, I mean, at the appropriate time, the necessary engagements with the relevant stakeholders, would take place. Barring all of these issues, what advice, as brief as it may be, what advice would the Competition Commission perhaps want to put on the table now so that they would begin to think of it? Because ultimately, whether they come to you or they don't come to you, whether they've come to you or they've not come to you yet, ultimately they will come to you, and ultimately they would have to heed some of the advices that you would put on the table vis-a-vis this initiative of trying to reposition Gamtel Gamcel, because at the end of the day, you are the Competition Commission. At the end of the day, we want to see Gamtel and Gamcel to the point where they are, where they become more efficient and are contributing what us consumers expect from them. As key ICT players in the economy. So, what are perhaps one or two advice that you may give to them that they need to perhaps begin to think about, because those are things that you may bring to their attention when they come to the Competition Commission. Are you willing to provide that service, or would you rather hold on to that until the appropriate time?
I'd rather hold on to it, but I also throw a caution that, when you look at the sector, there is, you said consumers, we have expectations as consumers from the sector. Holistically, is that being met? So do we need an injection of new players to make the necessary investment to help us get there? So that's also something that we should consider. Are we, given the current status, are we reaping the benefits of ICT as a country?
Value for money.
Yeah, value for money, yes. Internet of Things, what other countries are doing that we cannot do, are they willing to invest to get us to where we want to be? Because he mentioned something that was key, aging infrastructure, etc., etc. You know the issue of drop calls and all that. It's now almost a joke, like, I have Gamcel, and when they call, I'm like, midway it will be like, it will cut off or something will happen, and they're like, the other party will be like, oh, it's Gamcel again. Is that acceptable?
Okay. Fair enough. Let me come to my good friend, Mr. Junkung Jabate, who is the head of legal at Pura. My apologies for putting Pura on the spot, but when I looked at the Act of Pura, and I looked at the 2001 Act, I don't know whether the Act has been amended since then, but I looked at the 2001 Act and the 2010 regulations. But when I looked at both of those documents, I did not see anywhere, and I crudely do so by, Control F, which is, quick lookup within, Word documents. I have not seen anywhere where specific references or articles are made in relation to mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if that is indeed the case, why is that? Because mergers and acquisitions is a reality within the ICT sector. And we have 4 GSM operators here and a number of ISP players. So you would expect that down the line, as the market evolves, as the market develops, as the market becomes more sophisticated, you would have pockets of M&As here and there, and you would also have issues of divestiture. So why is it that your act or the regulations have not looked at that, if it indeed has not looked at it?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. I join other panelists to thank our viewers for the opportunity for Pura to come and respond to some of these questions. First, I think the response to your question would be if we look at the Act of Pura, which is basically a constitutive act to establish Pura and also to define its functions and responsibilities, as well as the key responsibilities and the personnel, the employment of personnel, and the matters of personnel. PURA is a multi-sector regulator. So you wouldn't find some of these things in the PURA Act, because the Act, as I said, is basically and purely for the operations, the establishments, as well as the basic functions of PURA. But the sectors that we regulate also have sector-specific legislations or legal regimes. I guess if you had looked at the IC Act, Section 46, talks about anti-competitive behaviors, including mergers, acquisitions, and so on. And also has given PURA responsibility, certain responsibilities in that respect. And some of those responsibilities are, one, we should be notified of any of those things, and then we can mount an investigation to see whether it is anti-competitive or not progressive for the smooth running of the industry. And if that happens, I'm not saying that is the situation that has happened, but if that happens, we will obviously go to the knowledge bank of competition, which is the Gambia Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, for guidance and also for their input. And that is also consequent on the MOU that we have with them, which specify our responsibilities in terms of our role in the sector that we regulate, as well as in the general jurisdiction of their act. So I am sure in your Control F, if it had taken you to the IC Act, you would have seen that the IC Act talked about or spoke about anti-competitive behaviors, including mergers and acquisitions.
It also talks about consumer protection.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, we were discussing this. Section 48(1) also talks about that where some of those issues, when they erupt within the sector that we regulate, we are duty bound to inform the Competition Commission for Competition Commission to take up the investigation or the analysis, and then give us advice, as to the way forward in resolving the situation.
Okay. Let me do a follow-up question on that, and perhaps the crux of this discussion for today. And here I would go back to the Honorable Minister. I mean, perhaps this question should have been directed at PURA first, then you. But I'm coming to you, and then ultimately to PURA. And this has to do with the Zoom wireless saga, which I, referred to earlier in the introduction of this program. Issue being that not too long ago, we've seen on social media some stories circulating saying that Zoom Wireless, I believe the gentleman behind it is Khalifa Fall, if I recall correctly, putting a post on social media saying that Zoom Wireless, a company that supposedly is registered in the Gambia but is yet to commence operations, within the ISP services, the internet service, as an internet service provider, and that it has now been acquired by Group Sonatel, Dakar. Group Sonatel being a company that pretty much runs Orange in Senegal, with a number of subsidiaries in Mali, in Guinea-Bissau, in Conakry, and I believe in Sierra Leone as well. I know for Zoom Wireless to have had their operational license, this would have come to you and you would perhaps have signed the license, which they have, which they now have. The question I want to put to you is, Zoom Wireless has no track record in the Gambia. Yes, I understand that perhaps you would have signed the license and the expectation would have been that they're going to be an ISP provider that we're going to start operations in the Gambia. But they are yet to start operations in the Gambia and now have been acquired by a company that resides outside of the Gambia. What is your take on this? Do you see any complexities as long as this arrangement is concerned?
Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts. As far as the Ministry of Information and Communication Infrastructure is concerned, we have not got any document on that proposed merger or acquisition that you talked about. So I don't actually want to respond to comments in social media. Yes, my ministry gave license to Zoom Wireless. It's a 3-year license. is it 5 years or 3 years? It's a 5-year license, as stipulated, under the ICT Act, and the license has conditions, which along the way, the licensee, has to fulfill. And what happens is that when people apply for this type of license, they go through a very rigorous vetting system by the regulator. And the regulator recommends to my ministry, and we are at liberty to reject or accept that recommendation. In this case, looking at the veracity of all what was presented to us and the due diligence that, as always, the regulator does when it comes to documentation of this nature, we gave the license to Wireless, I think, last year, 2018, to commence operations in the Gambia. Now, if issues of merger and acquisition are being talked about, as a ministry that leads on policy, we will wait until we have all the facts before us, then we can act. But I think as a country, one thing that we are encouraging is to see a robust ICT sector that responds to the needs of the consumers. Are we able to fulfill that? How we are right now with our current quagmire of issues related to connectivity and also even the capacity to reach across the country. If yes, what is being done right now? If no, what can we do to be there? So these are issues, critical issues, that we need to collectively answer with of course with the support of the regulator and also the Competition Commission. As far as the Zoom Wireless is concerned, as I said before, since we have not got any documentation yet, we have already reached out to Pura, our main technical advisor, on some of these things to give us an update on this purported merger or takeover. When we get that, definitely we will respond appropriately. But I think as far as we are concerned right now, it's a matter of having to wait and see what is on the table and get all the necessary information and facts.
I think Honorable Minister has almost said the current status of Zoom Wireless. As far as we are concerned, also at the regulators level, there's only one licensee, which is Zoom Wireless. Its license has not been transferred to any entity, and we have not been in receipt of any information to say.
But the license cannot be transferred. It's non-transferable.
No.
Licenses are non-transferable.
No, license is transferable.
Okay, under what conditions?
After going through processes, you need to apply for transfer of license. Then the regulator, as he said, will do all the due diligence as well as analysis, and also involve the ministry. Then eventually addition will be made. Yes, those are the conditions. And also, you need to also factor in the interest of the state. In the IC Act, that the interest of the state as well as the consumers would also have to be taken into account. So it's transferable. But I am saying for Zoom Wireless, it hasn't got to that point because we have not received any correspondence from them to transfer their license as we speak to you. What had happened, maybe we need to put certain basic facts before you. What had happened was the shareholding structure was to be changed, wherein new shareholders would have to come in. And registration of companies is beyond Pura. It's at the Aegis Chambers level. And you can always change your shareholding structure. You can invite new shareholders as well as maintain your current shareholding structure. But the IC Act, Section 24 says, if you want to alter that, the shareholding structure, and the new shareholders would go beyond 50%, you need to notify the regulator about that shareholding structure changes. Zoom Wireless did that by informing us that there are investors who would want to buy shares into their company. That was done. Also, they had requested that whether the launching period can be increased. And we wrote to the, because we can't do that. We must say launchings are properties of the government. And it's the Honorable Minister who issues licensing, not PURA. So PURA had to write to the ministry to see whether that's a possibility. And the ministry said no.
Yeah.
The licensing period is 5 years, it's 5 years.
And
And
I
that was
think
communicated.
if I can come in just to clarify that, I mean, of all the licensing requests that came before me, we are guided by the policy. Yes, I mean, in this instance, I mean, a request was made to, make it 10 years because I think they were also depending on some financiers who wanted some form of guarantee that if they put in their money in this, they need to be reassured that the license period would not ever, overlap their funding amount, the amount of funding they are going to give. After critically going through this, I said, no, we should not set a precedent. I think, based on what we have in the IC Act, let us go by that. And then we can review the operational status of the company. And then if there is need to renew the license, then, we can still follow the laid down procedure and rules. And then, we can go ahead and give the license. So that was the thinking and the reason behind the rejection of the 10 years. Because sometimes you don't want to set a precedent and then, you find yourself in a very difficult situation to reject, subsequent ones that will come before you.
Well, let me do a follow-up question, and here I would want to bring, Mr. Cisse, to get your views on this, and perhaps Pura, you're at liberty as well to latch into this, onto this question.
I was going to just complete to say.
Okay, go ahead.
That what happened was, it was not an acquisition of our whole company with its lancing, but shares of the company were bought. We must also understand that cannot go into detail, but the existing shareholder, one of the existing shareholders, is still a shareholder. So whether it can be qualified as an acquisition, is something else. We know it's not a merger, because a merger means existing entities coming together to form a distinct entity. So that's out of it. But even acquisition, the experts can talk about. Well, legally, I would say, if somebody buys shares in a company and the company is still existing in its entirety, it's just a shareholding structure that has changed, maybe with some obligations. It is still not an acquisition.
Well, let me be a devil's advocate here, and here. We are looking at the facts, and it is a fact that Khalifa Fall himself, who is behind Zoom, is the one that have put a story on social media, is the one that has referred to this deal, whatever that deal is, he has referred to it as an acquisition. And I believe it is, he is the one who has also indicated that Group Sonatel is the one that has acquired a stake in Zoom Wireless. What percentage Group Sonatel has acquired, we do not know. How the acquisition came about, we do not know. But the expectation, and just from hearing what is being talked about, and that's why in the initial stages I said there are lots of misgivings and misrepresentations. But with the authority that sits around this table, we should be able to take interest in these misgivings, these misrepresentations, through the establishments of facts, for us to say, okay, at least people calm down, these are the realities vis-a-vis what obtains. Because Khalifa is the one who has called it an acquisition. Is he privy to stuff that we are not privy to? We know what an acquisition is. But the question I want to put, and this is where I was going to go to my good friend, Mr. Cisse, is acquisition. And here I'm going to get technical a little bit. Mergers we have established. You cannot have a merger. A merger means you have two operational entities that are coming together. But if I decide to acquire, I have to acquire something that is already in existence. Zoom Wireless is not in existence. Zoom Wireless, yes, perhaps it has been formed as a company. It is now a legal entity, but it is a legal entity that is yet to be operational. So the question now becomes, in terms of goodwill, it's zero. In terms of track record, it's zero. I mean, the Honorable Minister made the point that you did not want to review the application to give a license for 10 years, but rather stick with the 5 because it will be prudent to review the operational status of the company and with time make a decision as to whether it is prudent to now perhaps honor their request. That is being done for a reason. So Zoom Wireless has no track record, no goodwill. Why would any company outside, I'm just putting questions here, want to come and acquire a stake in Zoom Wireless? And this is the kicker. The kicker is that the misgivings out there is that Group Sonatel had always had interest in the telecoms industry in the Gambia, but they don't want to come direct. So now that Zoom Wireless is in the Gambia and has gotten an operational license, they find it as a way to get in. So irrespective of the performance and the track record or the goodwill of Zoom Wireless, they're willing to take that stake because they know it will get them a foot in the Gambia. So the question now is, does that circumvent or is that in line with the divestiture or M&A provisions of our policy documents in this country?
Let me come in. I think another thing we should understand, I think it's absolutely normal for businesses to seek partners. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
I don't think.
I agree.
Like, yes, they have a license, they haven't started, but,
Mm-hmm.
It's normal. You go and seek partners. I mean, most businesses here do that. Now, I don't know, you said they want a foothold into the Gambian market, which might be true or not, but what's holding them from just doing just that, coming in? It's a legitimate business. Now, the options available to us are just 3. We approve the merger, we reject the merger.
No, well,
I'll come in.
It's not a merger. Let's call it what it is.
Let me tell you why there is a very little difference between M&Es, because they are subject to the same treatment. So it's, call it whatever you want. It will be subject to the same treatment. It's called M&Es in competition because it's subject to the same, it's a takeover. It's somebody acquiring majority shares will result to.
But we don't know those details.
Exactly.
Yet.
So I don't want to get into
yes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, whatever the case is, those are the 2 options available to us. Approve, reject, approve with structural adjustments. Now, but the point he raised, I think is important. I think we need to look at it from a competition angle and the sector in general. What is actually obtaining? Are we where we want to be? And to me, if the answer is no, the issue of homegrown or like protection, which is what essentially you are not saying but you are alluding to, is to me out of the window. If like the figures they are giving us, 20% saturation rate, 35% internet penetration is anything to go by, there is lots of room for improvement and investment, be it from Gambia, Senegal, whoever it may be. To me, I'm the Competition Commission, the more the merrier. So long as the competition rules are not violated, I am okay with that. And being okay with that means consumers will eventually benefit from that transaction. So to me, like I said, it's not before us, we haven't done any analysis, but that's just something we should also consider. I mean, we need to be real. We need to understand where we are operating, what obtains, where we need to be, how far have we gone, and set benchmarks. I mean, are we reaping the benefits of the ICT sector in the Gambia? I mean, as a frequent traveler, I'll say, compared to even Senegal, the answer is a definite no. So let's also, let's be.
Any take on that?
No, not much, apart from the fact that with regards to, I want to emphasize on the transfer, that it cannot happen without Zoom making a formal request. And when they make that formal request, we have a rigorous system of analysis and review internally. And also that review is subject to us engaging the ministry and also other sector players like GCC, PC. So I don't want to analyze what was on the social media.
Exactly.
That may be the way the person expresses himself.
Okay.
And he may express himself better or worse. And that's left to the reader's perception. But what the reality is and the law is, it cannot happen without making a formal request. And when he makes that, it will go through a system. Now, from my legal understanding of acquisition, and what I see is that a company which is registered through the Companies Act, you know, invited other investors to buy shares in that company, and that happened, and that was what he said. So whether in his mind and understanding that is total acquisition, I wouldn't analyze until it is before me, because he himself is a shareholder. So until he tells me I am also that company, which is not the case, because he's an individual investor and shareholder. So for me, the issue, I'll withhold my analysis, legal analysis as PURA, until that formal request is made, and then we will do. And Gambians will be, because we have what is called supportive regulation. Our licensing regime enables both the licensee, I mean the applicant, as well as the public to participate. We've done that, you know, and all our processes are open and subject to, except certain reviews which are related to confidential information. But apart from that, we enable people to know the process. We go with you throughout. In fact, applicants lead the process until at a point that we, you know, you stop, and then we continue with our recommendation.
I hear the argument that is being made by Mr. Cisse in terms of that any company out there has should have the opportunity for anyone that wants to come and participate in the shareholding structure, I mean, of your company. And companies are, of course, at liberty, you know, to sell shares or to be acquired or to merge and stuff. Quite right, I have no problem with that. I also share the sentiments that as a regulator, I mean, as the Competition Commission, looking at vis-a-vis your mandate, the more the merrier. I mean, we know that we have an ICT sector in this country that is challenged. Those are established facts, and nobody is arguing on those. But the point here is, I mean, I'm a finance person, yeah? If I make a decision that I have interest in company X and I want to have an acquisition in company X, yeah, there is something that propels me to have that interest in company X. It's either the performance of company X, yeah, or the potential performance of company X. And for me to be able to ascertain the performance of company X or the potential, I have to have some financial documents in front of me for me to make that assessment. The question here is, and I hope, you know, that we're having this discussion to help educate the public and to bring awareness in terms of this issue at hand. If Zoom has not operated one day of its legal entity life, yeah, and has now gone and said company X wants to acquire what percentage we do not know yet, because they have yet to make a formal application to you, then it begs the question as to why that is.
Yeah, but you're missing one key point,
okay.
potential of the sector.
So
that is probably why they're coming in.
Potential of the sector, fine.
Yes.
If it's potential of the sector, then make a direct application to PURA. Because there's nothing there's no law in the Gambia that says that Group Sonatel cannot put forward an application to PURA.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So if you're talking of the potential of the sector, go to PURA directly.
That's why I said nothing stopping
yeah. So why go through Zoom? But the other point I want to make is, guys,
I just want to respond to that point.
No, let me go. Let me go. I mean, just hold on to. Let me not lose this thought. Group Sonatel has 53% of the market share in Senegal. Yeah, Group Sonatel has 56% of the market share in Mali. Yeah, I could give you the breakdowns, but for want of time, Group Sonatel has 63% of the market share in Guinea. Group Sonatel has 56% of the market share in Bissau. Group Sonatel has 45% of the market share in Sierra Leone. This is not a small company. In as much as we welcome competition and we want Group Sonatel, if they meet all your requirements to operate in the Gambia, there is a bigger picture to this whole issue that we should also pay attention to as a country.
Please.
You understand? I thought I just made this point, and I could share this information, I mean, with you. But now you can go ahead and make the point that you want to make.
Mr. Rawls,
let him go.
I wanted to
No.
that we should as a country,
Pay
pay
attention.
attention.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is that?
No, no.
We are part of the country.
We should
But
pay
Mr.
attention. We should pay attention to the size of Group Sonatel and the fact that Group Sonatel is spreading its wings across the West African region in terms of control of the ICT
Yeah,
sector.
Mr.
Hold on. Is it Group Sonatel or Orange?
No, no, it's Group Sonatel. Group Sonatel.
Group
No,
Sonatel, they are not in Sierra Leone. I think what is in Sierra Leone is Orange.
No, he didn't mention Sierra Leone. But
No, 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 no.
No, Sierra Leone.
I did.
And Guinea also is not Group Sonatel that is there. It's Orange.
But no,
No,
but Group
I know-
Sonatel owns
no, but
Orange.
let's not go into all
do
that.
know that
Honorable
Orange is an
Minister,
international company.
Honorable
They are
Minister,
in Uganda, they are in Europe, they are in Asia, and they are in Africa.
I'm reading from the Group Sonatel report, annual report, 2018.
No,
Yeah.
they own the Orange business in Senegal.
Yeah,
It's a
yes,
partnership.
yes.
But, you know, I mean, it's not in Guinea. It's not Group Sonatel that owns the Orange business
even
in
Sierra
Guinea,
Orange.
in Conakry,
I am
in
telling
Sierra
you,
Leone.
I am telling you, Honorable Minister.
Well,
I
that
can
will be
share-
surprise to
I
me.
can share the report with you.
I think we are wasting
I have
time.
done- I have-
For want of
I have
time,
done-
Okay, we
I've
will
done my
be
research.
interested to have that report
Yeah.
because
For
I
want of
know
time.
Yeah,
that
yes.
in Uganda, for example, Orange is there big time on data and in some East African countries. I know in Europe, Orange is there big time on data. In some Asian market also. In West Africa, they are partnering with national telecoms companies like Sonatel Telecoms, National Telecoms Company of Guinea, the former National Telecoms Company of Guinea-Bissau, which was first acquired by, I think, MTN, but later abandoned. You know, so what we are seeing Orange doing is to come and partner with national companies. I think their operations in Senegal is very much limited to that of Sonatel, which was the former national company,
Yes.
100% owned by the Senegalese government, and they also went through a similar divestiture, just like we are about to
Yes.
do.
Honorable Minister, let me also say,
And this is the point that we are making.
Uh-huh.
It's a different ball game when they come and say they want a partner. For example, in your repositioning of Gamtel-Gamcell, that would have been a welcome opportunity.
In fact, what I don't understand, because that's why I said I don't want to
Well, that-
respond to this social media thing. Because is it Group Sonatel that is coming to the Gambia through Zoom Wireless or Orange? You know,
No.
this thing
It's
is
Group Sonatel as per what is on social media.
Group Sonatel.
Put there by the person
Okay,
behind
so
while
when we get the facts, we'll definitely cross
Pura
it.
is a professional.
I don't even think this is for you. I know that the ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority
Yes,
is headquartered in Gambia.
exactly.
And these are issues that they are looking at. I don't want to go into the details, but I've seen that the market share of Group Sonatel being discussed.
Yes.
You know, and I know that, you know, we are looking at it as a region and its impact on the region. I know that some work is already being done on that.
Okay.
So I think it's not lost. That's the point I'm trying to make.
That's the
Yes.
point.
You know, so
I just want to, I'm sure you know, but to know that Pura is a professional institution. We have experts in almost all areas.
Yeah.
You being a finance man, I can tell you authoritatively that we have also finance individuals who think alike and also look at all those parameters that you are now discussing. And that is why maybe if I was understood at the beginning, I said a formal request would be made. And that request is not like a letter. You send a request with all supporting documents. And also we do what is called market analysis by our Directorate of Economic Regulation to determine all these issues. And we have a law also which talks about anti-competitive acquisition and mergers, as well as an MOU with GCCPC. But let's not also forget that the members of staff of Pura are Gambians. We also have the same Gambian mentality, the same protectionist ideology. So we wouldn't do anything that will jeopardize the economic and political life of the Gambia or interest of the Gambia. We wouldn't do that. But in as much as I want us to be professional, we should avoid discussing a one-page social media write-up.
Exactly.
As I said, he may write it badly. It also may be the true reflection of what has happened. But as an institution, we don't rely your analysis on that. We will wait until it comes.
But this is the guy who is behind Zoom Wireless. This is the guy who's behind Zoom Wireless.
Yes.
So if he puts a post on social media, we have to take it seriously.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
But as a regulator,
Yes.
we wouldn't take that seriously because we are in custody of his information as per our file. So why do we have to? Because he can't do anything or any operation with the new shareholding structure without reverting to Pura. I hope you agree with my point.
No,
But also,
I totally
there's a
understand.
point I wanted to raise.
Yeah.
You've been talking about Zoom not having any operations. You know, as he said, license was issued last year. And when licenses are issued, there is a period in which you put your operations. Because also providing internet requires you to have a network, some form of equipment. and
Investment.
Yes. So there's always a time given for that to happen. And at some point we do audit to see whether you have taken off or you have not taken off. So as far as we are concerned, we cannot say Zoom has not started operation. Once the license is given to you, we expect you to do to start your initial operational activities.
And
So-
how long?
so
what's
may-
what's the
maybe-
span of that period? How long do you give someone once they've been given a license for them to commence
2
operations?
years.
You know, it's
18 months.
18 months.
18 months.
But no, but even that 18 months is subject to changes. You can write back to say because of this and this and this. This happened all the time in the broadcasting sector.
Yeah.
You know, but with regards to ISPs, maybe such a situation has never arose where an operational license is given and the person has not taken off for beyond 18 months. Even Zoom is still within that 18 months. You know, and I can assure you, our DICT officials are very good at doing that monitoring to tell you that you have not started operation. We have cancelled, written recommendation of cancellation of license because of that. So let's be very careful
So
to
you've
say
done that
they have
before?
not started. You know.
Well, no, but I mean,
But and there's no law in the Gambia which says you cannot also sell your shares even if you have not started operations
No, no,
at
no.
the company's level.
No. I mean, Junku, I think at our level, we should be very appreciative of certain issues. I mean, you are a legal mind, yeah? And if somebody wanted to have an equity stake in a company that is yet to be operational, one would have thought, for the interest of time, I mean, this discussion, there's a whole lot to this. One would have thought that perhaps Zoom Wireless could have approached Sonatel, Group Sonatel, even before they submitted a formal application to you. So this issue of them receiving a license and then now coming to say we've been acquired calls into question a number of issues. I mean, let us be factual on the matters at hand. I have established a company. I did not register the company, then go and look for investors. I went and looked for investors before I even registered the company. So if I register the company and then now somebody comes to me, especially in this case that we are discussing, it calls into question a number of issues. And these are the misgivings that I'm talking about. So it is for us to clear these misgivings. You know, let's look at things for what it is.
As far as the ministry is concerned and also Pura, no document has been submitted to us yet regarding this proposed issue.
Which I agree and I totally understand.
Yeah.
So you cannot talk on something because they have not yet
not
formally
before
come to
you.
you.
Exactly.
I understand that. But the
Yeah.
discussion is, let us be mindful of some of the misgivings out there and for us to know that we on board and discuss the issues that are being put forward as to concerns
Yeah,
by
of
the
course.
consumers
Of course.
and the citizenry of this country.
Of course, of course.
you understand?
And I will
This is the
invite,
point.
I will
Yeah.
invite individuals to utilize our complaint procedures. We have 148. We also have a directorate of consumer affairs. We are all, even if it is not about Zoom, but any other activity that one feels strongly concerned about, you should use that opportunity. But let us also understand, maybe this is my last statement before you invite the next person. It is not a strange situation to see an existing company having foreign shareholding structure.
An
It is not.
existing
Companies in the Gambia.
What do you mean by existing?
Companies that are in operations. That are in
Thank you.
operations, yes.
Thank you.
That are in
Yeah, of
operations.
course, of
And
course. It's
I have
not
defined
strange.
my
It's not
operation. I
strange.
said once
Yeah.
you have the operational license,
Yes.
your operation starts. This is what I'm saying. It depends on whether you are in full operation or you are just doing the initial, taking initial steps. But this is not a surprise to have that, especially in the sectors that we regulate, where we have high, dominance of foreign shareholders. That is not. What is important, and that is what PORA does, is to make sure that any sector player, any operator in the sector complies with the laws. It is to make sure that the interest of the Gambia is protected. Because ultimately, we are Gambians. As I tell people, I'm working for PORA, but I'm a consumer. Do you understand? And being a consumer, I should be conscious of my consumer rights. So we should do that. But I wouldn't want this discussion to be generated to a level of discussing a social media issue, which should be the remit of non-PORA staff. But for a PORA staff, because we are professionals and we have professional materials before us, we will engage in that. But we can provide answers to allay your fears. That is a matter that we'll take up when it comes, and we'll look at all other concerns
the
to
fears of the public,
arrive
not
at
me
a
personally.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Toure, welcome to the Business and Economy program. You are the senior economist at PORA.
Right.
And this is going to be baptism of fire, as they would say. You've taken your seat, and the question is going to go straight to you. The question I want to ask is, what is your view? You are an economist. You are the senior economist at PORA. What is your view in terms of Zoom Wireless being an internet service provider, and Group Sonatel having interest in it, and Group Sonatel is engaged in a number of activities across the line. They're engaged in corporate telephony services. They're internet, GSM, But here they are having interest in an ISP. When you have other GSM operators in the country that perhaps they could have sought partnership with, and they have not sought partnership in that. What is your take on that? How do you see that?
Yes, I think I was privy to the earlier discussions, but I was said earlier, this is an operational license that Zuma has already had. And I think when you look at the equity structure of companies, it is always open to have new partners on board, especially if it's something that you want to raise new capital, something to help with your deployment costs. Because one thing for sure is, at the start of every license application, there are sine qua non that every applicant has to submit. Part of this application is the involvement of a business plan that has to be submitted, which is also vetted by PORA to ensure that you have a feasible plan. So by all intents and purposes, we will not be here to second guess what due diligence Sonatel has done or Orange has done to acquire a stake in Zoom Wireless. There are other companies, for all we know, they've been approached. They might not want to sell. What we have seen is a social media post by the owner of Zoom Wireless, who has also indicated that Sonatel are interested or have acquired parts of Zoom Wireless. So as far as we're concerned, and looking at the dynamics of the sector, when you look at it, I think maybe Junkung has given some of the figures, but when you look at it, you look at the whole ISP segment, it's just around 4,500 subscribers across the country. And these are mainly residential and corporate. Now you go back and look at some of the figures. You go and look at the last household survey, where the census was done. You have about 230,000 households. When you look at it on a penetration level, at a household level, this is the fixed ISP market we're talking about. This is less than a 2% penetration rate. It shows you there is ample room for growth. Why is this not happening? Now you come back, you look at, is it a QoS issue? Are people not satisfied? Is it a pricing issue? What is the average ISP rate for a household that wants to have 1 meg of internet in their home? It's around $1,500 or up to $2,000. You're a financier, as you said. You look at the per capita basis of that. If a household, an average household, has to pay $1,500 for 1 meg of internet, now mind you, average household sizes in the Gambia are maybe 8 to 10 people. So 1 meg immediately is insufficient for that particular household. Now, you come back, you say, if somebody has come in and wants to invest in the sector, and we feel that competition is something that naturally drives prices down, and this is something we have witnessed in the sector. I remember the first SIM card you bought, you probably bought it for $500. Now a SIM card, the scratch card. Now that same SIM card, you're buying it for either $10, $5, or free. What is the reflection
There's
of
credit
that?
in it when it's given to you.
Yeah, there's credit in it, but that was, but initially your upfront cost, you had to pay $500 for that. Even the credit at that time was not more than $50. You're not getting $500. So immediately we can see the benefits of competition within the sector. Just last year, we have seen significant price drops where we had the first, we call it, I don't like using the term price war, but we had a very significant price competition between two major operators in the sector. That is a result of competition. Zoom Wireless is not the only ISP that has been licensed in the past 2 years. We have licensed other ISPs, and these are Gambian owned, and they have started operations as well. Unfortunately, they have made inroads and are doing well. So these are some of the issues that we also look at from a market analysis point of view to at least come up with the most optimal and optimum decision for the sector.
So if I hear you right, what you are saying is let's give Zoom Wireless a chance to operate in the country irrespective of what the ownership structure is or whether it's been acquired or not, primarily because they are going to bring some impetus into the economy, they're going to drive competition, and the penetration rate would perhaps move from that 2% level to maybe 5 or 10%. Is that what you are saying?
You made a very key word, irrespective. It's not irrespective of ownership. Every applicant is subject to the rigors of who the owners are. That is why part of the application process requires the submission of a certificate of character from the police. It even goes just beyond the financial capacity of who the applicant is. There are also character and moral judgments that are also involved in the licensing process. So it's not irrespective, but it is part of the things we consider when we're giving out the license.
Okay, fair enough. Let me come back to the Honorable Minister in terms of the sector. Earlier, before the start of this program, we had a side discussion in terms of the performance of the ICT sector, and we all agree that there are challenges. There are challenges in terms of cost. Mr. Ture just pinpointed to us the issue regarding the cost for 1 meg, in households, and also the penetration rate, which is very, 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 very low. We also know of the issue of calls dropping, network challenges. But we have also seen some investments that have been made in the sector. In the recent past and in the past, the likes of the EcoOne, the ACE, but we have not seen much improvement. When the ACE cable was being laid, there was so much joy and expectation, and we thought that, here we were about to move into that next level where everything would almost become seamless and we'll be, working ourselves into a digital age. So none of those things have happened. What is the challenge? What is the issue? Is it because of these networks, whether it's the EcoOne, whether it's the ACE, these nodes that are out there, are they interconnected? Are they not interconnected? Or is it the gateway? What is it?
Thank you so much. Well, the gateway has nothing to do with the EcoOne or the issue, because the gateway is only the voice gateway that we may come to. But when it comes to the ACE, before the ACE, actually, we all know how the situation of internet connectivity in this country was. It was extremely very bad and also very expensive. When the ACE came, it reduced the connectivity cost significantly. Then we have the EcoOne, which actually, the fiber is connected across the country. And then now we have the National Broadband Network. I think that 2018, there was a study done by Pura to look at the price structure of wholesale, and this has been dropped. I think it has been reduced from its original price to nearly 72%, which means that, in fact, we have seen in some instances to buy wholesale is far cheaper than to do retail, the cost. And we expect that this would reflect on the services being offered to the consumers. Probably what we need to do more is to see a strong collaboration between the Consumer Protection Agency and the regulator to look at the systemic issues of the operations of some of the operators. I mean, how comes it is very expensive, you know, to be charged, I mean, 1 gig in the Gambia compared to other countries? Is it because of electricity cost? Because we know that, you know, certain things are really very expensive to arrive at a decision in this country. Could it be electricity? Could it be other things associated with it? You know, so but Pura has done a very, you know, rigorous, thorough job in this, and I think, you know, I mean, Mr. Ture would be able to give you an appropriate answer. As far as we are concerned regarding the infrastructure, really we are making a significant headway, and with the coming of the national broadband network, we want to see a more robust, you know, sector that you know, utilizes these facilities, because it's like, I mean, plastic under the ground. If it is not used, it is of no value to them and also to the consumers. Government has taken the lead to spend so much money, you know, in this infrastructure, and we want it used. And we believe that the operators are interested in using it. The NBN, you know, I mean, will be transferred to the Gambia government at the end of this month. And we are already discussing with a number of operators and also, you know, Gamtel to look at the market, you know, usage of this. I mean, what can we do to ensure that everybody uses this, you know, I mean, a facility, you know, at affordable cost? Because that is very important. And this is something that we want to pursue with Pura, so that, you know, at the end of the day, probably when this when the MBN is finally handed over to the government at the end of this month, we will do a serious stakeholder meeting to look at its usage and how we can encourage everybody go through the national infrastructure, you know, to ensure that, you know, it is properly utilized.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, we are being told that we are out of time. For the first time, I have gone past my allocated time. But we want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for being with us. I want to seize this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister, you know, for once again honoring our invitation and joining us. I know that we'll have to bring the Competition Commission and Pura to have another program to touch on the very issues that you have raised, because I don't think we have had ample time to discuss all of the issues that we had wanted to discuss on this program. On that note, gentlemen, thank you for honoring our invitation, the Honorable Minister, Mr. Sise, Mr. Ture, and Mr. Junkung. Until we come your way next time, bye for now.